So after we saw Iliad Part 1 and Part 2, we saw Kane return, who was the brother of Kevin, being revealed as the one behind the attacks on Franklin, Leon, and his family. Now they were 3 coordinated hits, and he didn't see any of them coming, and coincidentally, it was on Peach's day off, someone who was still missing, and we saw Jerome on a mission to find his man's Peaches. And you could tell as episode 7 progressed, he really did take the supposed betrayal by Peaches harder than anyone else, and we saw Louie explaining why Peaches did what he did, which is a very similar explanation to what I gave last week in my recap. Peaches saw what Franklin did to Rob, because he knew that he was using, and anyone who's using is a liability, so where Peaches saw Franklin kill Rob, he knew it was only a matter of time before he was on the other side of Franklin's gun. But they focused so heavily on Peaches betraying them. One question we still need to ask is, was it really Peaches, or are they going to find him lying dead somewhere and realize that they were looking at this whole thing wrong? It's definitely something we need to consider and keep in the back of our minds. But this episode was heavily centered around Uncle Jerome, who had his own goals and dreams, just like Franklin has his, how Sissy has her own mission, Louie's got her own target in Kane, and so on. But we see Uncle Jerome who's realizing what he wants, setting up long-term plans and proposing to Aunt Louie. And we have to remember, Jerome never wanted to be in this game, he wanted to sell his weed and open up his music store for cars. And rewinding it back all the way to season 1, he even warned Franklin he doesn't want to get involved in this cocaine business because of the consequences that come with it. So now we're seeing him making plans to go back to his roots, but we all know it never goes to plan, and where he's proposed to Aunt Louie, honeymoon phases always do end. But I do think this honeymoon phase is not even going to begin, especially with the move that Aunt Louie is about to make with Kane. And is Louie right with the move that she wants to make? Because I think the question we should be asking is, does Leon and Franklin really think they can trust Kane? I don't think so, because family is everything. And during this talk between Leon, Franklin, Louie, and Uncle Jerome, you could tell Franklin wants to trust Leon to reason with Kane. And Louie and Jerome, they want him dead for what he did, because they don't want to take risks and they want the job done. But where Leon warns if they hit back at Kane, then it's a war, because he's an OG and he's got pull everywhere. But Jerome reminded him they were already in a war, and if they're not in a war with other people, as Harvey mentioned in episode 6, in this game you are constantly in a war with yourself. But where Franklin and Leon want to find a common ground with Kane, because he's someone they grew up with, someone they once looked up to. Louie knows that Kane, he can't be trusted, and it's similar to why she wanted to back Scully in season 4 instead of Manboy. So we're also seeing this divide between Franklin and Aunt Louie, which is definitely on thin ice, especially with the move that Aunt Louie made. But we're gonna get to that in just a moment. So on one side, we saw Leon talking to Kane and trying to reason with him that a war is bad for both sides, and he knows that what they did was wrong when they killed Kevin, but they did what they had to do because he was about to start a war with the Mexican OGs. But he admitted that they still did wrong because they didn't look after his family. But Kane also fucked up as well, because not only did he come after Franklin and Leon, he came after Sissy, Veronique, and Franklin's unborn baby, Aunt Louie, and Uncle Jerome. But Leon offered him a deal to look after his family and people, which was to move his powder, because there was endless money to be made. But where Leon was trying to make shit right with Kane, Louie was putting wheels in motion for Kane to be killed by Officer Buckley for 150k, giving him his name and address, and this was despite Leon making the deal with Kane. And it goes back to my question, does Leon and Franklin really believe they can trust Kane? Because Louie doesn't seem to think so, because she's now given Officer Buckley the go-ahead to go after Kane. But the problem with going after someone like Kane is, even if he's out in the open, who's someone who never hides, this is the reason why he'll be that much more difficult to take down. Because as Leon said, he's an OG, he's got pull everywhere, and he's well connected, and all this will do is only start a war with Kane. And when Franklin finds out what Aunt Louie put in motion, this relationship that's already on thin ice between Louie and Franklin is going to be on the cusp of breaking beyond repair, because this is Louie making a move behind Franklin's back. So not only could this cause a war between them and Kane, but also an internal war between the family. But let's talk about Jerome's journey in episode 7, because this episode focused heavily on Jerome and him looking for Peaches, because last week you could tell he took it personally when Peaches was accused of betrayal, because Peaches was his guy. But Louie reminded him even if he was your guy that he introduced to Franklin, he was then Franklin's guy, and he was the one who should have seen it coming. But where Franklin said he arranged for someone professional to hunt Peaches down, this wasn't enough for Jerome, so we saw him trying to get down to the bottom of this betrayal, because he was still somewhat heartbroken, and he still couldn't believe it, and really didn't want to believe that Peaches would do that to them. So we saw him visiting the local veteran center, paying his way to see Dr. Evans, who Peaches went to visit around a week ago. But this is where he bumped into someone called Oakley. Now, Oakley was a veteran who remembered Jerome from back in the day, from a party that him and Peaches went to, and where he said he saw Peaches around a week ago, so he followed Oakley, but where he took him into this meeting first, which definitely opened his eyes when this veteran was giving his story about him and his team being hunted down and shot one by one, and now he's just angry all the time. And in essence, this is what Jerome's mindset was, and similar to what he was thinking, he's angry, being shot at, and the betrayal and heartbreak, to the point where we saw him opening up to Aunt Louie. But before that happened, we saw Oakley taking him to the house where Peaches was last seen, but again, where Jerome sat and definitely had a lot of thinking time, and he was processing where he is, his relationships, and where he wants to be. But after this, he went to look for Peaches, pointing a gun at the back of Oakley's head, and realizing that Peaches was using, where he was told by one person that Peaches went to Thailand, but someone else saying he went to Burma, and you could tell Jerome was definitely heartbroken, not just by Peaches, but what he was seeing around him, and Louie knew how hard Jerome was taking the Peaches situation, putting it into perspective why he did what he did, which is what I went through at the beginning of this video, and last week. But this is where Jerome tells Aunt Louie that he needs to make some changes and reconnect back with his shit. And he wanted to go back to his roots, building businesses in the community, but he also knew what he wanted when it came to Aunt Louie, and this is where we saw him get down on one knee and proposing, and of course she accepted, and at some point we are going to see the wedding this season, but I'm sure we all know this honeymoon period ain't gonna last long. But speaking of love, we do see another romance in Parisa and Teddy, so let's talk about Teddy and Franklin Saint next, because Teddy was sure as shit wasn't happy about them being exposed, and him being the one who came out the worst. But Franklin told him it was Peaches with the inside job, and he was taking care of it. Teddy told him he was sloppy, and now he has to come to these meets on his own, with no backup, regardless of whether he had former Mossad or not. And if we learned one thing about Teddy is, he's straight business. He always has been and always will be. But he's also never liked Franklin's other side of business, in real estate, and he said everything is connected from his real estate to him, which can be connected back to Teddy. So he wants Franklin to stop all these high profile moves that he's making with his legit business, but it's too late for this, because this is Franklin's way out of the game, and he made Veronique and Sissy a promise, which he wants to keep, especially now that he's got a baby on the way, with Veronique talking about miscarriages. But talking about Veronique and Franklin, he said she sounds exactly like Sissy did, because of how she said Teddy's gonna end up killing him if the gangsters don't, and she sounds exactly like Sissy did, because she was talking to Sissy when Franklin was missing with Gustavo in East LA. But what she's saying isn't wrong, because Franklin and Teddy have been and are still in a deep game of chess with each other, and it really won't be easy for Franklin to leave the game, because can you just imagine Teddy letting him walk away with his legit real estate business that's connected to everything? I really don't think so, and we even see him with a recording and tracking devices that he wants Gustavo to help him with to put on Franklin. But the conversation that he had with Veronique led him to having this argument with Sissy, where he told her stick to the banking, collecting checks, and not his other life. But that's a whole nother problem in itself, because she's already involved in more ways than Franklin thinks, because she's been meeting Ruben, because she also wants to take down Teddy, and we saw her with a recorder, wondering whether or not to put it in Franklin's room, but she knows the risks of doing so, because it could get Franklin into trouble himself. And that's where we're going to wrap things up for episode 7, an episode which was based on trust, from Leon's deal with Kane, to Louie putting the wheels in motion to get back at Kane, Franklin still believing that Peaches was the one who betrayed him, and then there's also Teddy making his own moves, with Sissy in two minds about what to do, but they are definitely setting it all up for this shit to go sideways with Kane, especially with the move that Louie's made with Officer Buckley. So with that being said, drop all your thoughts down below on episode 8, and how do you see this playing out with Kane and Louie and Franklin? Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and of course if you're new to the channel and you haven't done so already, then remember to smash the subscribe button if you want to see everything Snowfall and Power Universe related. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.